Welcome to A Healthy Curiosity, the podcast that explores what it takes to be well in a busy world with self-care strategies from Chinese medicine. I'm your host, Brody Welch, here to support you on your journey of health, happiness, and personal evolution. Before we get going for today's show, I want to just say thank you to all of you who have gone over to iTunes and searched for A Healthy Curiosity and left me a review. They really help other people find the show. And so by way of expressing my appreciation, I want to just read out one of the 5-star reviews that I've had recently. This one is from EHM 1974, and M writes, I discovered this podcast a few weeks ago, and I've been listening to a new one each night before I settle in for bed. The topics are all relevant to me as I focus on health and wellness using natural resources and techniques. I also suffer with migraines and have found tips here that I have not heard before. I consider myself to have a fairly good base of knowledge, but Brody teaches me something new with each podcast. Also, I find her manner to be lovely, her voice soothing and easy to listen to, with just the right amount of humor. I've enjoyed all of her guests, as each brings something new and interesting and always use the language and examples the layperson can understand and engage with. I highly recommend this podcast. Thanks for all you do, Brody. And thank you, EHM 1974, for taking the time to leave me a review, and to the 41 others who have done the same. I super appreciate it. Thanks. And if you'd like to share some love, just head over to iTunes, search for the podcast, A Healthy Curiosity, click on rate and review the show, and give me your honest feedback. And perhaps I will be featuring you on a future episode. Thanks. Welcome to today's show. Today, we're going to explore several fascinating topics, to me at least: biohacking, sleep hacking, and self-quantification. My guest is Arvin Khamseh. He's an Oxford-trained geek and graduate of the National Organization of Development of Exceptional Talents. He's contributed to such publications as Thrive Global, the American Student Dental Association, Medium, and Better Humans. His expert advice has been featured on top-named Inc. magazine's podcast, Conscious Millionaire, and he's spoken on stages of the largest health and fitness retreat and festivals on the East Coast. After extensive research at a lab studying video games and its effects on psychology of teenagers and college students, self-experimentation, and personal mentoring, he was able to add 215 pounds to his deadlift, help his mother easily lose over 30 pounds, and has reversed 2 dental cavities. He also has the most diverse biography of any that I've ever read on A Healthy Curiosity. So, Arvin Khamseh, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today. Welcome.
It's great to be here with you.
So let's break it down for people who might not be familiar with the term biohacking or hacking in general as it applies to something other than computers. What is it, and how'd you get into it?
Yeah, very good. So hacking in the tech, and I think if you actually Google it, it will show up as taking control over a system that you don't have control over. And really, biohacking is something similar in the context of health, where you would get to have a little bit more control over your biology. And, compared to how, like in the past, you wouldn't have that access to it. And you actually make your biology to do things that you want to be able to do. And I think it starts with us, drinking even soda, all the way to, taking paracetams, NZT480, and different nootropics. So very diverse and broad topic.
So really, the goal is being able to have a little bit more control over our physiology.
Yeah, like we're control freaks, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly if we're purpose-driven people, it's like we recognize, like, okay, we've got to make the most of our time on this planet. How can I do that? And I first got interested in biohacking when I realized sort of the connection between just something as simple as using your breath to moderate your central nervous system, and how like a lot of people don't understand that we need to be in rest and repair mode in order to heal, in order to have a flow state, in order to basically be the people that we want to be, enjoying our lives. We can't be stressed out all the time, and like the most important thing that people need to know how to do is breathe in order to shift out of fight or flight and into rest and digest. So it's kind of like I kind of feel like breathing is biohacking 101, is learning how to breathe from your deep abdomen, and sort of that the basic building block would go from there. What do you think of that?
Yeah, totally. And it's so weird that we have to have a conversation about that, Like you would think everyone knows how to breathe, but like really no. Like so many people don't breathe on a daily basis. They just have to be reminded about this. And including myself, I sometimes forget, like, and I think the other thing you were talking about the breathing is I think about the heart rate variability, and I've been measuring my heart rate variability like almost every day, and I improved it by a couple of scores, and it's really interesting listening to our body is just say, hey, this is like how. So for those of people who don't know what heart rate variability is actually telling us how our body, especially our vascular system, is dealing with stress, and it gives us a score from 0 to 100. And so it really gives us more info about like, okay, should we be resting, or should we actually do work, um, based on that information.
How are you getting that information, out of curiosity?
Yeah, sure. So there is this company called Ithlete, I think, instead of athlete. It's ITHLETE, and they have an app. They have their own sensors as well, and you can essentially all it takes is like 1 minute. You breathe in and out, and it measures. It doesn't measure the heart rate necessarily. It measures different cycles of heart rate, and from that it gives you data like what your heart rate variability score is, and then it also gives you recommendations, like if it's red, you're not supposed to be working out that day because you're going to injure yourself. And this is not just working out, it could just be work. You shouldn't be working that day, you should be resting. And if it's green, you can go high intensity. High intensity again doesn't necessarily mean just deadlifts or squats. It could just mean high intensity, having like 12 sales calls. That's just high intensity for that person. And so there's definitely that, like us listening to our body from that
So
perspective.
this is a piece of technology that can help us make better decisions in our daily lives based on
Yeah,
it giving us information about our bodies that we don't have access to. That's pretty
exactly.
cool.
Yeah.
And in terms of biohacking, what other kinds of information should we want to have access to apart from heart rate variability? Like obviously getting a sense of where our nervous system is at, and therefore what activities are going to be uh, go over well that day versus not.
Mhm.
It would I can think of certainly genetics as being another piece of information that we could want to know about in order to know how to best take care of ourselves. What else do we need to know about in terms of like, are we paying attention to the right things?
Right, exactly. So it's really fascinating for me how there's this trend of wearables where you can measure so much you can quantify, first of all, our health, and then you can measure so much of it too with just, with the touch of a button. And like, I think of Apple Watch, where they give you a lot of data about your health, on a small screen. And so to going back to your question, there's so many things that we can do. And so what I like is for us to, I guess there's some baselines that we can measure and just have those and do it like every couple of months at least. And then there are certain ones that you just want to customize it to yourself. So let's say genetics, heart rate variability, and genetics meaning figuring out what genes we have and what SNPs we have or not. And so those two are really the baselines, because especially genetics is very unlikely for it to change as well. And so you do it only once, and you just get to know a lot about your own body. And then there are so for example, I did my gut bacteria biome that would actually give me actually funny story about that. The first time I did it, they gave me a spreadsheet with the name of my bacterias, and I couldn't do anything with that. Obviously, it was just like names of bacteria and the count of it. And it's like 3,000 of bifidobacteria. And I was like, okay, great. And
well, it's like telling you that you have, 25 deer living in your forest yard, and you have 10 squirrels and you have, whatever. It's like, exactly. Okay, great. That's my ecosystem.
Right. Exactly. And so now it has evolved so that you actually get to compare your count of bacteria and the diversity with the average population. So they have enough data for us to actually have that comparison, and we can have a baseline of our own body. So going back to your question again, another thing that I really like is our gut biome. And I think there is just so much that we're learning about the gut biome and genetics that those two are really probably the best self-quantifications anyone could invest in.
And with the gut bacteria test, are you doing that through Viome or a different company?
I did it through Ubiome.
Ubiome.
And yeah, I was one of their early adopters, and so they also just recently sent me like a bunch of kits to do like almost like every 2 weeks. So then I get to even like more closely, more obsessively monitor my gut biome, which I really like.
Well, because it's going to change as far, like the gut bugs are going to thrive depends on what you're feeding them and the different. Yeah. So it's a good way to tell whether you're feeding them the right things.
Right. Yeah. And then there are other things, there are other self-quantification methods. So for example, let's say you could actually measure how much you have of each neurotransmitters in our brain. And the other thing is we can measure the heavy metals in our body. Hopefully we don't have a lot. And then the hormones. So something I really like is actually like figuring out how we're doing with hormones like every couple of months. And the other thing is, so like, I don't know if in US, if this is similar, but in Canada, we have, as part of the healthcare, we can at least have, I think once or twice of like full blood panel. And it's not just, the like cholesterol, LDL, HDL. It's like a very comprehensive test. So those are really helpful tests too, because we get to actually see if what we're doing on a daily basis is really serving us or not.
Well, that makes so much sense to give people access to that data where we can do something about it and making that available to people, because I'm quite sure that that's not something that most Americans have access to on a regular basis, or without actually having to fight for it and pay for it through the nose.
Absolutely. And I think I've had clients where like they would do it privately through either Wellness FX or Insight Tracker. Those are, I think, the two only companies. Well, I think there's Genova as well, maybe 3 companies that they do those testing. And you get to actually do a lot, but it's also very expensive.
When I work with people as in coaching, in a coaching capacity, one of the things that I encourage them to do is to get really specific about what they want to change, because what gets measured changes just by the act of us observing it and having an intention about it. We're much more likely to succeed in that area. So a lot of times it like, for example, if we're wanting to lose weight, if we're wanting to start a meditation practice, that these kinds of things, we need to know what we're doing now in order to know what better looks like, and in order to kind of figure out what are, even how to set a goal that seems achievable and realistic, and figuring that out. So in terms of like trying to biohack the intangibles, like for example, stress, like a lot of times that's one that people have trouble with, is figuring out like, okay, I just know that my life feels stressful and I want it to feel less stressful. Heart rate variability seems like one way that we could measure that. But in terms of just like, if people don't have the technology, how would you go about working with someone on stress reduction, as far as figuring out a way of to like, would you try to measure that directly? Would you try to find markers for it? And how would you help somebody set a goal to reduce stress, for example?
Yeah, so it's a very, very good question. So I think there are a bunch of ways. So the first thing I would think about, if someone's is in a very stressful lifestyle, I would look into, let's say, serotonin, not serotonin, cortisol hormone, and then also um, HSCRP for inflammation. So those are like the biomarkers from the blood. Then there's the HRV, we talked about, and then there are people who don't have access to all of this, and then what should they do, right? So I would, for those people, I would actually look into things like, there's this measure, it's a qualitative measure called PSQI, I think it's Pittsburgh Sleep Index Study, I think it's called. And that's really just by answering questions, qualitative questions, they can actually get to score their um, their enthusiasm, their what else do they have there? The irritability, bunch of different measures on a daily basis. And then as soon as they have a score, they're at a place where you want them to be, right? Where they know where they're at, and then now they can focus on where they want to go, and bring that intention into it.
Awesome. So really just establishing that yeah, exactly. It sounds like that's a more qualitative way of establishing a baseline, and then being able to revisit that in a period of time and see if whatever intervention they were trying worked.
Yeah, and then the other
Uh-huh.
thing is, I guess another thing that I'm just thinking is that if they don't want to measure, which I don't like when people don't measure things because it just gets confusing. Um, if they don't like to measure, sometimes, again, like the qualitative feeling of on a daily basis. So if they can, again, they could measure that too, but they could also just say, hey, today, out of on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm feeling a 7. Feeling an 8 tomorrow, and just making an average of it every week, and then compare it, and just see if their lifestyle is just like, if someone, let's say, has a 3 out of 10 every day, they know they need to be doing something with their life, and maybe they don't even need the scoring anymore. They're probably already thinking about doing something about their life.
Exactly. Quick announcement about a mind body detox day that I'm going to be hosting on April 14th, which is a Saturday. In Chinese medicine philosophy, the energies of the seasons are reflected in our bodies and minds and emotions as well. And the season of the spring is associated with the liver, which is all about new growth, and also detoxifying our lives from what no longer serves us. And this happens on a mental, emotional, and spiritual as well as physical level. So I'm inviting you to join me for a day where we're going to align with the chi of spring and support our livers so that we can handle stress better, so that we can support our courage, clarity, creativity, and self-expression, keep ourselves in rhythm digestively, reproductively, diurnally, and adapt and evolve into who we are becoming next. We're going to be doing Qigong, breathing, meditation. We're going to be getting into dietary and herbal tips for the change of seasons, as well as acupoints for stress and stress-related problems. We'll go into EFT and tapping for limiting beliefs, and we'll play with essential oils. If you want in, head over to brodywelch.com/mind-body-detox and claim your spot. Hope to see you there. And Also, if you love live events, mark your calendars for my retreat that I'm going to be hosting in Mexico at Present Moment Retreat Center, February 16th through 23rd of 2019. That's next year. Get out of the cold and wet and dreary and come hang out on the beach with me. It's going to be super fun. Details soon. But Mind Body Detox Day, April 14th. Would love to have you join me. Now back to today's show. I know one of the things that you help people with is sleep. And I'd really love to get into that because it seems like for a lot of people, it's like we know what we need to do to exercise. We know what we need to do to change our diets. But sleep is one of those things that we can feel rather powerless around if we're just looking at it from the framework of, okay, it's 5 minutes before I want to be asleep. How do I make that happen?
Yeah.
So I'm curious as to what advice you have for people around hacking their sleep.
I think I want to give context first to people for thinking, first of all, why do you even want to do sleep hacking, or who's doing that? And the context is that people from, I think, 1960s, they started actually thinking of humans as machines, which is not really workable. And so they wanted to, I guess we wanted to really maximize our efficiency. And so the first thing that I think that I guess us humans thought about was, how about like we don't sleep? So we just work like every day, nonstop. And of course that doesn't work. And then there is
right, that idea that sleep is optional or like that it's a big waste of time was really in vogue with philosophers in the early part of the 20th century.
Yeah, exactly. And there's probably 2% of the population that can. I think it's Benjamin Franklin and there are two other people that have been able to, just based on the history of them, have been able to sleep 2-3 hours a day and really function really well. And then again, we don't know if they were to sleep, let's say 7 hours, 8 hours, maybe they would function better. We never know. In that, in that, I guess, era, people started really thinking about it. And then even like maybe even more recent, like let's say 50 Cent, where he kept like going on YouTube videos and talking about how sleep is for people who are broke. It's like, not really. It's not for people who are broke. And of course, like I guess I see the other side of it is where Ariana Huffington, from Huffington Post, she talks a lot about how sleep is just such a pivotal thing, like it's a foundation for everything we're doing, our business, our relationship, everything.
Well, it's the kind of thing where people who listen to the podcast have probably heard me get on my soapbox about this one, because in Chinese medicine, yin and yang need each other, and sleep is the yin that enables the yang of life to happen. And it's like, and the more that we, like I've had guests talk about sleep in the past, and just how important it is that we, like, you're kidding yourself if you are getting less than 7 hours of sleep and thinking that you're doing great. And the fact that just like driving drunk, people who are sleep deprived don't necessarily, like, they think they're far more functional than they are, which is, I think, kind of hilarious. Everyone's like, that we hide people's keys when we don't want them to drive home in a dangerous, inebriated way. But when people are sleep deprived, it's like they're just out there. They're just out there, possibly not living, we're robbing our brains of the opportunity to detoxify at night, which is mainly and to encode memories into our frame of reference, and just so many things, plus just our ability to feel present and to enjoy life. So yeah, and yet we're in this culture that glorifies getting more done, and so a lot of people feel like tempted to just make their days longer and their nights shorter.
Yeah. And I think there is something to be said around how it's possible. It's possible to maximize the sleep quality. It's also possible to, let's say, get things more done, not just by sleeping more, but also, let's say, taking nootropics. So nootropics being cognitive enhancing drugs. And then, so this is all possible. It's just that with nootropics, there is no free lunch. So if let's say us taking it, then we should be expecting also some compromised health as well because of it. And then as far as sleep goes, it's totally possible to optimize it as well. And I think the challenge with most people is that I think us humans, as much as we think we're really smart, we are not as smart as we think we are, in the sense that if it takes, let's say, if we don't sleep well for, let's say, a month, we forget what it was like a month ago with a better sleep quality. And then we really get used to how sleep is at that moment. So then there's no place, or there's no space for people to improve on their sleep. So they, like, I think of college students where they do this for 4 years, they just pull all-nighters all the time, and then when they come out of the college, they just think it's the only thing they know how to. And so and then they continue with it, not knowing what it is going to be like if they actually optimize their sleep. So there's that challenge too.
Got it. And so we know it's important. We know that we need it. And so how do we do it?
Yeah, exactly. So the first thing, I know we talked a little bit about the self-quantification, genetics, and HRV. So those are two things I want to relate that back into the sleep quality and also the PSQI. I think the first thing your audience, if someone's listening to this and they want to know where they're at with their sleep quality, the first thing they should be doing, they should go and do this questionnaire called the PSQI. And this is the questionnaire that any sleep studies that you look into, they've done this to measure the sleep quality. So it's the universally accepted measure for sleep quality. And of course there are devices too, but this is more workable as far as the technology goes and accessibility of it. So then really look into it and just say, measure it. Let's say if they get a score of, for example, I think of my client, she just recently got a score of 7 when we started working with her, and you wanted the score be below 5 for us to have an optimized sleep quality. So let's say someone gets a score of 7, and then there are different sections, I guess different areas where they can optimize their sleep. So let's say if someone's waking up during the night multiple times, first of all, it's not normal. The thing that they can do, first thing I comes to mind is myrtle essential oil. They can have that, just have a dash of it on their pillow. And
did you say myrtle?
Yeah, myrtle.
Okay.
Myrtle
Great.
oil. And then so there's that. If someone's having difficulty sleeping, then there could be a bunch of reasons for it. So it's not that they wake up in the middle of the night. It's that they have difficulty sleeping. And for difficulty sleeping people, they can use anything that would really reduce the the activity of their CNS. So for example, I think of lavender essential oil. I think of having something that would just relax them right before bed. Maybe getting a massage, acupuncture, getting what else? Yeah, I get I have this massage bed that I use all the time.
Nice.
Or you could have someone give you a massage, like someone family members, so it's free. And
self massage works great too. It's
totally.
Yeah, like it's getting a really you can combine some of these ideas.
Yeah.
You can get a really beautiful oil with some essential oils in it. You can give yourself a head to toe massage, talk to your central nervous system, get it to wind down a little bit.
Yeah.
And even just and combine it with some acupoints. You can do like your feet or your hands or your scalp, or these areas of the body that are microsystems for the whole, and with that intention can be really helpful.
Yeah. And to add to that, I think something I didn't mention. So I guess what I'm doing here is really giving strategies for people. It's not necessarily the exact same thing that they should be doing. Is that just the way of thinking about how they can systematically tackle that problem. So another thing about people who wake up multiple times during the night is, let's say, having making sure they have the last drink of, and I'm not talking about alcoholic drinks, just any drinks, the last drink about 3 hours before they go to bed. And that makes a huge difference for people, and when they don't have to wake up. The other thing is, some people wake up because their adrenal glands are highly activated because they just work out a lot. They have a stressful life, when we talked about this. And if they actually have access to glucometer, they can measure the glucose. The glucose is usually really low, and their cortisol hormone is really high, around like 2 to 4 a.m. And another thing, again, is if they have, let's say, pathogens in their gut. And the reason that would make them wake up is that pathogens would actually start working during the night. They're nocturnal. And so there are so many things, but I guess
Wait, what kind of pathogens are nocturnal? That's fascinating.
All of them.
All of them?
Because there's like a lot of parasites that are essentially like responsible for the sleep quality. And I can't think of a specific name that right now. And there are a lot of parasites that you if you have them, they would start working during the night when you're asleep. And then that would actually that would on its own would increase the stress hormone, cortisol, bring down the glucose level, but also it's just an inflammation for our body. So our sleep quality, instead of like think about it, is we have certain amount of resources in our body, and some of it, and in fact for most people, is like a lot of it is allocated to the pathogen or dealing with the pathogen, as opposed to just sleeping. And so then we end up with a compromised sleep.
That makes so much sense, right? That it takes energy to keep a pathogen or a parasite at bay.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it's constantly siphoning off your body's energy, you have less for everything else.
Yeah.
And you could wake up not feeling particularly rested. I appreciate that you're bringing in this idea that there are multiple causes that could be at work in terms of why, which is always, I think, why sleep is a tricky one, because there's definitely not a one size fits all solution. From a Chinese medicine standpoint, if somebody comes in with insomnia, we can look at, well, okay, well, we could diagnose them as having some qi stagnation issues, which would be stress. There could be not enough yin in the kidney or heart, which is basically you need that sort of that heavy, moist, cooling energy to hold down the yang of consciousness as we sleep. And there can be blood deficiency. There can be all sorts of reasons that people struggle with sleep. So it's really hard to come up with a one size fits all solution a lot of times.
Yeah, and that's amazing. I think I want to add to that. That is being really conscious of what we need, as opposed to a cookie cutter method for taking care of the sleep, because that would be like taking melatonin. I see a lot of people, as soon as they realize like they have trouble sleeping, they just pop a pill, and that's not helpful. In fact, like I could go on a rant about melatonin and how that's not helpful for most people. But
I just learned that melatonin is one of those exceptions to, like, I used to be really cautious about it too. I recently learned that it doesn't mess with the body's own ability to produce melatonin, and that, like, where I live in the Pacific Northwest, that a lot of people are really low in melatonin because we don't get a whole lot of sunlight throughout the winter. But it sounds like you disagree with that.
Well, yeah, and I like this. So I think the reason I disagree with it is that I know about the context of where melatonin is being produced, and that is, years ago at Stanford Study Center, they figured out the melatonin, and they figured out like what melatonin does, and the effective dosage for it was about, I think they found it to be about 0.5 milligram, and because they have a license on it, most supplement companies have to pay them if they want to create 0.5 or something around that. Maybe even like to 1, 0.5 to 1. And so I see a lot of companies, they make it to be 3, 4, 5, all these different numbers. And then
higher numbers, like way higher.
Way higher, right? And then there's also the antioxidant effects of melatonin, which is starts at around, I think, 19 milligrams. But then there are people who are in between. So there are a lot of companies who create melatonin to be something like 8 or 10. And then you're like, okay, well, you're not getting the antioxidant effects. You're not creating that effective dose for melatonin neither. And so it sounds like it's almost like they just like trying to get away with like paying for the license, and then they just create the supplements without even communicating that with people. So that's what I don't like about melatonin.
Got it. So it's not like it in and of itself is necessarily a bad
Yeah, no,
solution
it's
for
not.
someone who's deficient.
Definitely.
Okay, good. Yeah, I have been using a liquid melatonin that I feel like is a godsend because, but yeah, I've had a lot of crazy hormonal issues, and that and my body, it seems like, forgot how to sleep despite doing things like exercising and meditating,
Yeah.
and it's just been super helpful in my life.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, there are other ways to get melatonin. Like if someone just wants to get melatonin, it could also be related to how much vitamin D they're getting, how much serotonin they have in their body, how much L-tryptophan they have in their body because of their diet. And they could just start taking L-tryptophan instead. So there's like a lot of ways to raise melatonin as well, in addition to just taking the melatonin.
Absolutely. I'm really glad that you brought that up. And also, it's important to look at what we can be doing that can be depleting our melatonin stores, specifically staring at blue light, right?
Right, absolutely. And I think that's the reason, you were talking about that earlier on. That's one of the reasons that we don't have as much melatonin, or we have difficulty to sleep in the first place. And having, like, I have my night walkers glasses on, which are blue blocking glasses, and those are the one I found to be the most helpful. Like, I and I want to make a distinction for people where they know like what the difference is between having enough melatonin at night and not having enough melatonin. So having enough melatonin and having also the cortisol hormone be balanced at night would look like, let's say, if my sleeping time is at like 9:30 to 10:45, around that time I actually start yawning, I feel tired, I want to sleep. Like, I feel like if there's nothing else happening, I would just naturally sleep. And I think that's not sometimes the experience people are having. Most of the time people experience actually forcing themselves to sleep and just like, oh, what am I going to do tomorrow, what are my goals for tomorrow, who am I going to call, what's going to happen tonight, what am I thinking right now. That's the comparison.
Got it. Yeah, and definitely it's from a Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic perspective, there's also, it's important to be hooked up with natural rhythms in order
Yeah.
to optimally support sleep. And this is something like, just this year, the Nobel Prize, or 2017, the Nobel Prize winners were awarded for circadian medicine and studying kind of how our human biology is about hooking up with nature.
Yeah.
And the idea that if what's going on in your mind is all the things that you have to do and is like trying to perpetuate the things that we need to keep doing, then it's pretty hard to just fall into that natural rhythm of like, okay, it's night, it's time to wind down, it's time to stop thinking about work.
Yeah, absolutely. And that rhythm is so important. And like, we started having that rhythm and then we kind of screwed it up with the technologies that we have. And so going back to and returning to that again is a golden step toward actually optimizing our sleep. Like, for example, in the morning, because I don't sometimes in Vancouver we don't get sun, and or we don't get sun as much. And what I do, I have this thing called the Verilux, um, or there's another thing I have. It's called a human charger. Both of them would shine a ton of blue light. One of them is like 5,000 flux blue light, and the other one is a transcranial blue light, which means I would just have the blue light going through my ears to to my skull.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Why would you want that?
Right. So the difference is that the transcranial blue light is actually getting the blue light into our brain. So think about headphones. You put it on, and it shines blue light through the ears, and it's more effective than you actually looking at the light. And again, like that's the technology we have access to, because we just screwed up with all the other technologies. And for people who don't have access to it, they could just get that 20 minutes of sunlight first thing in the morning.
Wait, so why do we want blue light in our brains?
Oh, sure. So, totally.
Back up a little bit.
Yes, sure. So the transcranial blue light human charger is creating that environment where, first of all, our circadian rhythm is really managed by SCN. This is part of our brain. So there's a reason we want it to be even like more, I guess, more directly accessing our brain than just having it go through our eyes. So does that make more sense now? So if let's say for people who are going in like sunbathing in front of the sun, light will go through their eyes, and then it will hit their brain. So in the middle of their brain. So from the suprachiasmatic all the way from the optic nerve all the way to the SCN. But whereas with the transcranial, you literally just bypass that. You get into the SCN.
Got it. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. You are a powerful being, and it's really hard to feel that way if you're stressed, overwhelmed, or routinely overriding your body's cries for rest, nourishment, movement, and joy. You deserve to make time to take care of yourself and to enjoy your life, not just get through the day. If you are ready to stop putting yourself last on your own to-do list, you're invited to claim one of the last few spots for the May round of Level Up Your Life, my transformation incubator. We focus on the basics of self-care, but the kind of evolution people experience goes so much deeper. They talk about having more confidence in expressing themselves, finding their voices. They feel stronger, lighter, happier, clearer, and way more stress resilient. Like Rachel, who shares, I'm feeling more comfortable and present in my body, and I can feel the empowerment that comes with that, both physically and also in terms of strengthened boundaries. Thank you for this and for keeping me on this journey of learning, deepening, and growing. It's really an incredible community of conscious women who are serious about showing up differently in the world and living in alignment with the person they know themselves to be. So if you're ready to start living powerfully, I'd love to talk to you. Head to brodywelch.com/level-up and schedule your free call. We'll see if it's a good fit. Now back to the show. So I understand that you have a resource for people who are interested in getting more into this sleep hacking. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, totally. So I interviewed 2,000 entrepreneurs and CEOs and asked them one question. I said, hey, what is your biggest challenge with sleep? And based on the answers that they provided, I created a video series of sleep hacking training that I shared it with people in different countries, and I would love to share it with people, your audience as well. And the best place to get it, actually, maybe we give them a link, or how do we want to do that?
I'm happy to throw a link into the show notes. And yeah, we'll make sure that that is available for people. So you'll head to brodywelch.com. And on the episode with Arvin Khamseh, there will be a link to the sleep hacking information that he's referencing.
Perfect. And they could also go to hackmybiology.com as well. And there are usually places where they can find that resource as well.
Awesome. Yeah. Wonderful. Arvin, this has been an amazingly informative discussion. I've got to know before we get off here, how did you reverse your dental cavities?
Oh yeah, perfect. Sure. So first thing I did, again, like quantify it, right? I do what I talk about. So I quantified my bone density, the minerals in my body, everything. And then I figured out, okay, so vitamin D, there were things I was low on. So maybe let me give you context on like what dental cavities are. So dental cavities are demineralization of our teeth. And so if you can actually mineralize it back again, you will have restored the dental cavity. And so I had x-rays of my dental cavities, and then I measured everything, the bone density, everything. And then, so what I did was I did a mega dose of vitamin D, and then also this thing called the Blue Ice Royal, it's the cod, what is it called? The
Cod liver?
cod liver, yeah. And I think I want to say about like I'm trying to think of the actual thing. I think it's like 400 milligram, and I think I had 12 of them every day for about 6 weeks. And that's all it took, really, like simple. That's all it took for reversing. Oh, so I guess I was on a ketogenic diet too at that point. And there are actually research about how eating, having a lot of fat consumed is helpful for our teeth as well. So maybe it's the combination of all of them, all three of them.
Really cool. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. I kind of feel like, just because one of my favorite things in the world is paradigm blending, just to put a word in for the fact that Ayurveda and Chinese medicine are kind of the original biohacking sciences, because it's all about knowing your constitution and being friends with your constitution. When you understand what your constitutional tendencies are, or the proclivities that you came in with and what your body is sort of naturally geared towards, the better that you can manage things like your nervous system and make your lifestyle match to match your potential of who you could be. So that's one of those, like, just encouragement is like, just as I would encourage you all to take Arvin's advice and get out there and figure out what genetic mutations you might have and what your heart rate variability is, and to all these numbers that we've gotten into. Also know your dosha, know whether you are Vata Pitta Kapha, know whether you are a wood, fire, earth, metal, or water type in the Chinese medicine model, because when you understand that, you understand the situations in which you thrive, and the situations and what you need to do to balance yourself, and what choices you might be making daily, whether it's diet or lifestyle or just thought pattern wise, that could be taking you out of balance.
That's awesome.
So anyway, thanks again for this wonderful conversation. I really appreciate it. And I'll try to have links to everything that you mentioned here on the show today in the show notes. So Arvin Khamseh, thank you.
Thanks for listening today. For more episodes of A Healthy Curiosity, you can visit the iTunes store. If you appreciated today's show, please leave us a review. This helps other people to find the podcast. You could also head to brodywelch.com, where you can find free self-care resources, learn more about Chinese medicine, and let me know what you'd like to hear about on future episodes. I'd love to hear from you. Till next time, be good to yourself.